Okay, good morning, good
Good
evening.
morning.
Pooja,
Good morning.
Pooja Soni is an author, and she's a guest today in a dialogue that FearTalks 10. This is my 10th talk on what I conceptualized as two people entering a conversation that obviously involves fear. Obviously, it could involve fearlessness, it can involve other topics too. And today we'll be covering probably a fair number of topics, particularly the notion of what is consciousness, what are some of the foundational elements of self. And Pooja has just done a whole book. So we'll get to the book in a moment. What I want to have in this conversation, I don't know about you, Pooja, but one of the things I've noticed is it's really hard to have a conversation with people without them judging, categorizing, trying to interrupt and take things in the direction that they want to talk about things, rather than really having a good listening and a curiosity. And I've always had this little bit of a theory in the back of my head with all the people I talk to on Fear Talks is, can we have a conversation that maybe just is not allowed in normal cultures, in normal societies and the norms, and almost taboos sometimes about talking about certain deep topics? And even the topic of fear sometimes is actually, in the West anyway, I don't know about it's kind of a taboo topic to talk about more than just for a few seconds and then we move on.
Yes, I think part of the reason why this is because we are obsessed with happiness, the good feelings, the good experiences. We don't want to talk about anger or fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I know in your notes that you sent me on your book, you talked about, we want everything to be more or less predictable. I think you use a phrase, we dread when we make a mistake on predicting things, right? Which is really another form of obsession, as you use the word, I agree, control. To attempt to make life risk less. And I think in that process probably leads to some of what you've talked about and I talk about, and we'll get into it, of anxiety disorders of all kinds, where fear becomes a problem and a meta problem. So
I think the control. I think the control issue comes uh, where we are obsessed with the mathematics or science in general, because science is all about predictions and proving what you have predicted. You frame a prediction and you try to prove it. So I think we are obsessed with this notion that uh, we need to prove everything we we predict about the world around us. And I think we are, as a society, we are obsessed with trying to be in control of things around us, even the world, how it ultimately shapes us. I think we start trying to control everything around us, including new experiences. So in that sense, I think fear is related to that control. And fear comes with uncertainty in life. If you can't handle uncertainty in life, if you can't handle prediction errors, you can't handle your failures, I think fear can have an impact on you.
yeah.
And we should also, I think, speak about the correlation between fear and anger, fear leading to anger
Yeah.
or aggression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll come back. We'll
Mhm.
come back and circle on those. So I'm going to just read a provocative quote from you just before we start. And I even want to get to know a little bit more about you, and you can ask questions to me if you like. So, but you wrote, in order to lead a fearless life, and we'll just leave that definition open for now. A fearless life, it's an interesting phrase. Believing in chance and allowing ourselves to make mistakes and learning from new experiences is the way to go. End of
Mhm.
quote. So you know that I've been writing about fearlessness and fear, and fearless is what I sort of call the kind of very highest level of self. And I want to get into your book because at some point you have 6 levels of self, I believe. That's the right,
Eight,
is that the right way
actually.
to
Eight.
phrase
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, 8 levels.
8 levels. Okay. So I saw
Mhm.
6 in your notes, but you even have 2 more. So we're going to be exploring that today. And so our audience already has got a sense that there's a lot of deep concepts here. Obviously, in a talk of 40 minutes, we're just barely going to be able to touch on some things, as you know. But can you tell me a little bit about what got you interested, as a person growing up? What, like, I know Desh Subi, you know him as well, Philosophy of
Yeah.
Fearism. He said when he was a little boy, he used to just watch everybody so closely, and he lived out in a village, and in the rural areas. It was a farming community. But he said even then, he said, I watched everybody very carefully. And I asked you, I says, well, Des, what were you watching? What was most interesting? He said, I was most interested in how people reacted in fear
Mm.
and all the consequences and the different dynamics of what happened. So Pooja, where were you raised? Where were you born? And what was your way of coming to be so serious of a scholar now at your age?
So, uh, I was born and raised in Bangalore, India. Uh, my interest in consciousness in general, or emotions particularly, uh, started when I was in depression, when I was quote unquote depressed. Uh, one of the striking factors about depression is that you don't feel bad from inside, but people around you tell you that you seem to be low, you seem to be disinterested in things. So I found that the way we look at sadness is is the basis of most mental illnesses. I know I'm making a huge claim here, but I think our obsession as a society with pleasure or good experiences like happiness, surprise, has put our minds in a framework where we no longer understand the importance of negative experiences. So yes, so the my experience with depression and existential crisis, which almost everyone my age go through. So these things have pushed me to look at human experience in general,
Yeah.
human life in general. Hmm.
Yeah, so I don't think you're a psychologist trained or even training to be a psychologist in a clinical world or anything like that, or a psychiatrist. What are you sort of studying formally to bring up your awareness to be able to write a book? What are your main interests? You seem to be a philosopher more to me.
So basically, I was doing my engineering in chemical engineering. So it has no connection with
Yeah.
philosophy or psychology of some sort. But sometimes, when the urge to understand something in life is greater than trying to follow the rules of the education system, I think you have to give up the education that you have been. Uh, that you are being given. So I took that leap. I became brave and I gave up my academic career and I started traveling the world. I started reading books
Mm.
um, and when you're in India, you can't escape Hinduism. So Hinduism, I think, was my doorway to understand philosophy in general. Yeah, but I have passed that stage because I see some problems with Hinduism. I see it as some sort of escapism. I see the obsession with goodness or happiness or mm, lack of sadness is where we are obsessed with as a society. Or but the thing is, Hinduism or other religions have a positive uh, contribution to human life because when you believe in God or when you're religious, you start believing in chances. You start, because when you think about God, you have to believe in chance, because you haven't seen God. God is just in your imagination mostly, or other people's imaginations.
Are you using chance in a way like faith?
Faith, exactly.
Okay.
Chance and faith.
Okay.
Because when you have faith, you have no idea of what to expect. You just believe in something. So when you are yeah, so anxiety in a sense is related to predictions and being in control. That's where religion, I think, releases us from such an obsession as beings. It releases us and it gives us a sort of comfort. So religion basically gives us the safe space to live our life and be safe in a sense, and be protected from uh, yeah.
So we could
Hmm.
say, and I kind of, what I'm picking up and I understand I'm not a religious person myself in that way, but I
Hmm.
certainly am interested in the higher levels of development of the self into what we might call that more soul spiritual realm of awareness, of reality, ontologies, right? Epistemologies, ways of being. So I really respect that. And I think you're right that the beautiful concept of God is basically that which is, leaving it wide open in the imagination, really, that which is already. It
Yes,
it's not
and that which
not
is the
going
domain of
it's
all
not
possibility.
it's not going to be something unpredictable either at some level, although one can still leave a lot of mystery with that God,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
That higher being.
Hmm.
However, the very essence or notion of the higher being is it already is already. It's not just a human condition and a construct, right, that's playing out in the
Hmm.
precarities of the material world. And so that's why I think it's a replacement for the precarity, right? The unpredictableness, the devastation of real life. And so it's nice to have a transcendent place to go to, as you say, for that secure, predictable comfort, unconditional love. So I think both of us would agree that we're not here in a sort of anti-religious or anti-God.
Hmm.
And I know
Exactly.
you even use the word God, but I think you use it like probably I do in a quite more, not as such more as a metaphor or a consciousness state.
Hmm.
God consciousness, right, is another way of talking
Hmm.
about
Yes. So I define God as the domain of maximum possible experiences.
it. Right. Why did you come
So
to that? Why did you come to that concept? Can you just help us?
mhm.
How did that evolve? It's a very interesting definition. I've never heard that definition of.
so uh, so in according to me, depression is recurrent sadness. You are sad repeatedly.
Yeah.
You experience the experience of sadness repeatedly. So, if you look at my definition of emotions, emotions are basically ways of enhancing what you are as a self, and the positive experiences. So you, when you experience a positive experience such as happiness, you expose your senses to feel the stimulus around you. And when you experience negative experiences such as fear or anger, what you do is you inhibit your senses from being exposed to new stimulus. So you are in a sense escaping from the stimulus. So so in that sense, sadness could be a state where you want to escape from something that makes you sad. But since sadness can open up the negative parts of your life, I think the negative parts of your life are things you haven't explored, the things that you don't want to explore, or you haven't been haven't been given a chance to explore, because people around you or the society in general is conditioned to teach you what is good for you and to avoid the things that is those are not good for you. So
Or
in doing
risky,
that,
or risky for you.
risky, yeah.
Not even.
Sadness,
Yeah.
yes, sadness takes you to this realm where you are not safe. You can't predict what is going to happen, and uh, you're not sure of what is the safe zone anymore.
Yeah.
So I think sadness is a gateway to an alternative world within your own world. So, but I also agree that depression feels bad. It feels bad because you are not open to new experiences in your own world, the world you have lived so far.
Mm-hmm.
So, so in order to uh, in order to say that sadness is bad, repetitive experience of any experience is bad. I say that even if you are repeatedly happy, you could be depressed. So in that sense, so if I'm happy all the time, I think you can I think we also feel the same kind of depression. People have reported that I'm happy, my life is so perfect, everything is going fine, but still I feel this feeling of being stuck in my life.
Right.
This feeling of being stuck can be correlated to the idea of God that I explained, because when you the levels of self are like a ladder that you have to climb. A baby climbs such a ladder because from the developmental psychological perspective, each level of self gives you the knowledge of syntax, each part of syntax. So for example, the first level self gives you the knowledge of adjectives, the second about the nouns, the third about verbs. So but alongside the so I believe in Noam Chomsky's idea that uh, grammar, you have an innate ability to understand things, you have an innate ability of language, but the experiences that you experience have to happen for those slots to be functional, in a sense, the slots for syntax. So in that sense, uh, being stuck in one level means you are stuck with one kind of experience. Um, so if you think about sadness or negative experiences in a positive way, where is the negative feeling? Where is the feeling of being stuck? Why do we feel stuck anyways? Why can't we just lead a life of happiness and not complain that I'm happy, but still I feel stuck, I feel depressed? So that is where the notion of God being the domain of maximum possible experiences, and we as beings being having this urge to be like God. Because if we try to maximize our experiences, if we jump from one experience to the new kind of experience, we become closer to God. So what the ultimate goal in life, I think, is to maximize our experiences to the extent that we become most like God. Because when we die, we complete our the set of experiences which could be predetermined by some entity like a god, or which could just be a random number, because we as humans are different people who, maybe your life could have been different from mine, but still you have had new experiences and I also have had new experiences. But the only difference between me and you could generally be the number of experiences. It could be age related, it could be anything.
Culturally,
So
culturally limited, etc.
culturally, yes. So yes.
So one of the things I'm thinking that is core to your work, and it's really intrigues me, is it's a kind of tolerance to uncertainty, is the simple way of putting it. And for me, I've talked about that decision-making process that we can consciously go through with practices of conscious awareness, of basically allowing ourselves to experiment more, risk more, do what's a little bit uncomfortable and even let in what is uncomfortable. So it's not always about
Exactly.
doing. It's not always about doing. It's actually about receiving sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just receiving the stimulus. And so let's go back to sadness for a moment, if you don't mind. Just receiving the notion of sadness, I think is a really rich concept. So thank you for kind of just starting that. I think sadness is different than depression as a syndrome. Depression is perhaps a syndrome that is sadness that gets stuck. Sadness is not the depressive element itself, but it's our relationship to experiencing sadness where we get stuck in it. And I think that's what we can now label up, right, clinical depression or something that we might call pathological. But what seems really important is that sadness is almost, to me, it possibly even has, and I'd be curious what, I'm just exploring this as we go, it's almost like an ontological disturbance. Sadness tells us there's an ontological disturbance of something's changing and I'm not sure I want to change, right?
Exactly.
Not only in
Yes.
me, but in the world. I don't even know
Mm-hmm.
if I want to see that
Yes.
changing. I don't know if I want to see the pandemic. I mean, who
Mm-hmm.
isn't sad? Who isn't sad, really, if we're honest, that there is
Mm-hmm.
a pandemic, devastating so much human life on a massive scale, and then it's restricting our thing. So any comments that you have on that notion of sadness?
Yes, I do think that sadness is an experience from inside, but also from the outside. So when you have a bodily pain, you if you have a fracture in your leg, you will be in pain and you will be sad because this fracture is not going to heal anytime soon. And the sadness makes you stay in one place. It doesn't inspire you to stand, it doesn't inspire you to stand and have new experiences. So in that sense, sadness is good for your body. It's like your body is telling you that just stay in one place so that I can heal myself.
Mhm.
So when you're in pain, when you're in bodily pain, sadness is good for you in that sense. It could be a sign from your body that something wrong is happening. So just stop your plans and stay still for some time, maybe. So
I mean, it's sort
so
of
in that.
basic to recovery. It's got a
Yeah.
sense of grief in it. It's got a sense of
Mhm.
recovery,
Mhm.
restoration, and that's slowing down most of our Western societies, or even the Eastern now with industrialization. Well, you should be this. You should be up. You should be going.
Mhm.
And if you don't, there's something wrong with you.
Yes. So this is like a natural kind of sadness
Right.
that is good in itself.
Right.
But there is another kind of sadness, that is the feeling of sadness that I talk about. So I take inspiration from this idea of emotions and feelings. Uh, um,
Right.
so an emotion is an emotion in general, but it is also a feeling, because you can think and feel bad. You can think and feel sad. For instance, uh, so you have a fracture in your leg, and if you think that you can't go about your planned day, your sadness will increase even further. But on the other side, if you think that uh, it's okay to have a break, it's okay to not execute my plans for the day, then I think the sadness is used in a positive way. So the manner in which we think about our pain is also crucial. For instance, I can try to clearly explain this idea. When I look at something which looks like a snake to me, but it's actually a rope, I am for example, I look at something which looks like, I imagine it to be a snake, and I automatically start feeling fear. So this is not something that the external environment is making me feel. It's the stimulus, the starting point of fear starts from my own mind. My own mind conditions me to think that I am in direct contact with something which is harmful, which has been harmful in the past. So basically, if you have to think, if you have to imagine something bad, you have to go through the experience of the physical experience of something impacting you in a harmful way. So experiences tune us to create scenarios where even though the environment is not harmful for us, we hallucinate ourselves. We think that something is bad for us because it's not ideal. So we have this tendency of creating this perfect world in our minds, and when something is violated, some law in our imagined fantasy world, I could call it a fantasy world, because we yes. So when something is violated, we automatically go towards the experience of fear. And sometimes when we are unable to do something about it, so when you initially you fear, but also you try to stop that thing that is violating your laws, that is violating your ideas. So you try to stop that, stop whatever is happening. So uh, in doing that we could also get into anger, because
And that was
for
what,
instance,
that's part of your escape, your notion of concept of
exactly.
escape, right?
Mhm.
Which is really crucial to, and the other factor is if we're not in escape, what's the other concept you use in
Now
juxtaposition?
persist. You persist to
Persist.
experience.
Yeah, persist. So that's kind of like staying in your integrity. Persistence
Yes.
like integrity. That's what I see here.
Persist. Yes.
Okay.
Staying.
Okay.
Mhm.
So
So.
yeah, go
Mhm.
ahead.
So fear takes you to this world of uncertainty, and since we are conditioned to think about fear in a escaping manner, we try to escape
Right.
from it.
Right. Right.
But if we started thinking about fear and even sadness or crying, we could explore that world of uncertainty. And since in order to understand any experience, I think the core idea of self is very important. And to me, a self, any self, any being, a plant, a rock, for that matter, or even humans, we do two things. We either try to persist, we either stay, or we try to escape. Our bodies stay in bodies and mind. The domain of body is in interaction with the physical world, but the domain of our mind is where two kinds of thoughts, the positive and negative thoughts, are in constant interaction with each other. So we as selves try to negotiate sometimes, but mostly what we do is we try to encompass some thoughts within some thoughts to create concepts. That's how we learn concepts. A concept is a group of thoughts. So we I think we have this set of values, and these values take us to form concepts. So if I was a criminal, my concepts would be radically different from someone like a saint, because we so both of us have the same concepts, but the thing is we categorize, or we create groups of thoughts in our minds as per our values, the values, the core values uh, that make us feel guilt for sometimes guilt and shame. So I think these values generate this urge to think of our experiences as good and bad. So where society teaches us to live life is in the framework of these values that we set up in our lives, because without values we are not different personalities, we are same personalities leading the same kinds of experiences. Basically everyone is the same, but the difference is we have different values, value systems, which could be influenced by the cultures or our personal experiences. and the people around us, because we are generally selves. The people around us are like stimulus, like a chair. A chair could be similar to a person, because what I do with the chair, I sit on a chair or I don't sit on a chair. The same I'm doing with a person, because I agree with the person's ideology about things, or I don't agree. So basically what we do ourselves is two things. We try to um, accommodate the knowledge that they are giving us, or we try to escape and we disagree. So yes, I think I lost.
That's okay.
Yes.
That's good. So you've been sharing your book. Do you have a copy of it to show us right now?
I think I don't have it right
Okay.
now.
All right. Well, just tell us what the title is, please.
The Emergence of Levels of Self. The name of the book is Emergence of Levels of Self, a new theory of consciousness.
Right. And in part of it, you said you were attempting to solve some of the body-mind problem that's been
Yes.
historical in philosophy. How
Mhm.
have you solved it or tried to solve it? Like, can
Mhm.
you just give a short version of this is what you think you've uniquely done?
Mhm. So the mind body problem is basically to explain why we experience bodily experiences is fine, because we can say that the physical world impacts us in a certain way and we react in a certain way. But why do we have not experiences which are just mindly, in a sense? So that is where the mind body problem starts.
So it's
And I take a very
exterior and interior, right? We're trying to figure out the relationship of the
between.
exterior world, the interiority of experience, and the exteriority of experience. And we can
Mhm.
call that the mind body problem. So that's just another way to
Mhm.
put it.
Mhm. Yes. So I take this idea of uh, hallucination, or we hallucinate the nature of the stimulus around us. I take a
Which
very
is,
phenomenological.
and that's found in all spiritual traditions generally, isn't it? The great wisdom traditions talk about that hallucination or the illusion, Maya. There's several
Illusion.
concepts. So, okay,
Mhm.
go ahead.
So I take a very phenomenological approach to it by
Yeah,
saying that uh, in the experience of reflex, there is only one muscle movement involved. Uh, I take inspiration from Paul Ekman's work on facial expressions,
right, right.
uh, where he describes the movement of each muscle. He gives a number to the movement of each muscle, and I say that each reflex is is a movement of a single muscle to safeguard one of the senses. For example, blink reflex. When I undergo a blink reflex, the muscles of my eyes try to make the eye less exposed to the stimulus, which is generally dangerous for my eyes. So in that sense, I am escaping in blink reflex. And yes, and you can take another example. So basically, in the experience of reflex, you have one muscle movement moving to expose the sense organ or not expose the sense organ. So in my theory, there has to be merge of an
Merger
experience
or
of
unity, a unity.
unity of few experiences for new experiences to emerge from it.
Right.
So basically, the emergence of levels of self is the positive and negative experience of negative phases or facets of a particular experience, such as reflex, have to combine together to lead to the formation of emotions. So because you can generally describe emotion as movement of the sense organs. Paul Ekman describes
Mm,
emotions. For example, the emotion of fear is a collection of movement of 7 muscles
mm,
on your face.
mm.
So out of those muscles, you can categorize, you can carve out uh, a meaning to it by saying that each muscle is trying to expose the sense organ, or it is trying to diminish the exposition of the sense organ to the stimulus. So so I have found that two muscles which are at play in the experience of reflex give collectively form an emotion. So I show that when you have enough number of muscle movements in reflexes, you could have an emotion. A baby starts having an emotion. So in that sense, I define the emergence of mind, because as a self experiencing reflex, for instance, let me take an example. There is a bright light shining on you, shining on your eyes, or shining on your body generally, and you can experience blink reflex and you can safeguard your eyes. But at the same time, you can also experience crying experience, which involves many sense organs, not just the eye. So in that sense, the body or the self who is experiencing the same stimulus reacts in 5 axis ways. Once in 4 axis ways, because your eyes are already, so you don't need extra sense organs to deal with the stimulus. You don't need to cry. You can just close your eyes. But in doing that, the self of the emotion, the self of the level of emotion is hallucinating or imagining the false nature of the stimulus, that is the bright light shining on your eyes. So the 4 axis ways in which the body reacts towards the stimulus, which doesn't impact all of the sense organs but just one, is where we can carve out the illusion, the
And
illusion that is the mind.
and are you saying that mind is
Mhm.
starts in an illusion?
Yes, the mind is
That's an
the mind
interesting
starts,
concept.
the
That's an
mind
interesting
is
concept. Does anybody else say that? Is that in the
I'm not,
literatures other places?
I'm not sure they do.
Right.
uh, so so it could be that mind is your body's useless attempt to react against a non-existing stimulus, because in this case, when the bright light is shining on your eyes, you don't need to open your tongue. When you cry, you have protrusion of tongue, you have exhaling action, you have vocalization, and your skin becomes impermissive to experience the stimulus outside. So the mind could basically be considered as a failed attempt of the body to react against a stimulus which doesn't exist actually in the physical world.
Right. Okay. This is very interesting. Of course, it's complex. All viewers may struggle a little bit, but please read her book. That's the main thing,
Yes.
because I have not even read your book, and I'm just playing with some of your notions.
Mm-hmm.
So bear with me. Um, I'm going to use the notion that um, that mind. So we'll just stick with this for a moment. The emergence of mind, therefore, as you see it, and I think there's some good truth to this. It's not so much it's useless. That would be one way to frame it, as the word you used, that gets it into a hallucination. I would say it's an excess. It's
Exactly.
it's it's when the whole complex system, right? Because you're dealing with so many nerve endings and so many
you're just
communi-
a body you're just a body before that, and
yeah,
then
just a body even, right?
you're
It's got
like
so
a
many
plant.
complexities. And so
Mm-hmm.
many of those complexities, you're just bound to have a system interacting with a dynamic world, right? A world
Mm-hmm.
that's constantly changing. It's bound to have excesses of reactions to, and just like a computer would, if you had so many inputs going into a program,
Mm-hmm.
it's bound to have certain excesses that are you could call them useless, but I would just call them they're excessive, and they can be distortive. They can be
Mm-hmm.
distortive of a good, efficient outcome. So I think perhaps your mind concept, if we just stay at this level that we're speaking, and that's only part of your theory, I understand, it's sort of saying that intelligence or natural intelligence, right, and these sort of natural principles and laws, they're not perfect. They have problems. They have prediction errors. And so that gets to another concept in your book, is prediction error.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what you've really built right now here, Soni and Pooja, in my view, is you've built a philosophy of mind that shows the mind is not perfect. And
Yes.
it's not perfect because its actual physical base is not perfect. It's a set of programs, it's a set of communications that can have failures and excesses and distortions. So what then I think you're saying, okay, if we have that kind of theory of mind, right, rather than a mind that somehow it perfects the physical world, it's higher than the physical world. You can hear we put all kinds of projections onto that mind image and imaginary that makes it perfect. And then when it fails, then we really collapse.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my,
Mm-hmm.
but I think what you're doing is putting a real cautionary, if you understand what I mean by that. You're putting a cautionary of, well, that no one said that's what the mind is. I mean, let's look at the reality of the biophysical reality of these communication complex systems in a dynamic world of constant change. Let's be more humble about what the mind is so that we
Mm-hmm.
don't have to collapse and crash when the mind doesn't do a good job for
Yes.
us.
Yes. You
Is
can only blame emergence for us having a mind, because the merger leads to the reaction in excess ways. The merger
Say that
between
merger.
the
Explain that merger slowly, because I don't think I got
Mhm.
it yet.
Yes. So blink reflex is an escape interaction because you close your eyes. But sucking reflex, the baby sucks, the tongue is exposed to new stimulus. So it's a persist kind of reflex. So we have two categories of reflexes, so two facets of an experience when merged together. When they merge, this is a non-reductive kind of emergence, where when you reduce an emotion, uh, 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 you don't get a reflex in general. You have to when you merge all the reflexes together, the positive and the negative, a new emotion is born, in a sense.
So
So that is,
would you use integrate as well as merge? Integration?
yes,
Okay.
integration. Yes,
Okay.
it's a kind of integration.
Okay. Well,
Yes, and then we also see that when positive and negative experiences, sadness and happiness, when they merge, so basically
oh,
emotion
interesting.
is,
Okay.
yes. So emotion is, all your senses are at play. They are trying to either expose the senses, expose the body of the senses to the stimulus, or not expose the body of the body of the senses to the stimulus. So in the next level, you have locomotion, because the whole body is moving from one place to another. The body is not yet it's no longer still, and it is not in it is not confined to one place, and it is not just dealing with a stimulus or a group of stimulus, but it is also moving. So movement is where I think we start to control the world around us, because when you start moving, you can choose the kind of effect the environment has to have upon you. For instance, when a baby has is surrounded by a cold environment,
Yeah.
it could just walk away. So walking is where I think most of the control starts. We start having control. For instance, a plant cannot control. The plant also moves towards the
Okay.
sun, but that's it. It
Yeah.
can't move to a new place and fix itself in a new stimulus, new kind of environment.
So just because we're running out of time too,
Mm-hmm.
you can sort of see that what Pooja is laying out here are levels of self-consciousness, and going right from what we don't normally call a self, but it is a physical self, a somatic body experiencing, taking that up and through movement, and then eventually you would go into more mind-based, and linguistics, language production, and then reflection upon reflection in the higher levels, I would say. And what would level 8 be, for example? Could you what term do you use for level 8?
Level 8 is where we pass the test for theory of mind. We have an idea of what the other person is thinking about. For instance, a plant cannot have such complex way of thinking about the world. So, uh, so so basically the levels are the levels of awareness, the steady pace of awareness about the environment. We know about ourselves in the beginning, and then we know that others are similar to us. When we know that others are similar to us, we try to justify our thoughts by speaking with people. We try to, that's where spoken language, that's where we start speaking with people. So so basically we have a framework of language before we start speaking with people. The intent to speak with people is to try to find people who agree with us and find people who don't agree with us. So this is also where the self is at play, because the self is basically anything anywhere which is trying to do two things. It is trying to expose itself to something. It could be thoughts, it could be bodily experiences, or it is trying to escape. So yes, at level
And
8 you would.
it's trying to predict.
Exactly. It is trying to predict when the schematic knowledge, when the schema is formed, most what we do at that level is prediction, prediction, and prediction. But when we predict positively, when our prediction has been found to be true, we experience emotions. So I'd say that prediction success is more dangerous than prediction error, because when you have prediction success, for example, I look at something which looks like a snake, and I move forward and I see a snake.
Yeah.
I will complete I will complete my experience of fear. So but then I'm going down, I'm descending the ladder of
and
experiences.
and you're descending in the sense of, because all you're really doing is reinforcing a habit that's already been learned about how to
Mm-hmm.
recognize a
Exactly.
snake. So
Mm-hmm.
you're not really learning anything new other than, okay, my predictions, what you're learning is my prediction is working.
Yes,
That's
you're
about
just in
it.
your world.
That's
Yes,
about it,
you're
right?
just in your hallucinated world. But when you undergo prediction error, that is when you know, no,
Yeah.
this is the right place to find a snake, but still I'm not finding a snake. It's just a rope. So it's something new. Even
Yeah.
if this world around me, the environmental setup is tuned to me seeing a snake, but still I don't see a snake. So I make a prediction error. So this is where I try to learn something new. I try to
Yeah.
say that even if the environment looks the same, there could be a different entity there.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, if I keep my keys in a fixed place each day, but I forget to keep my keys this day, then it just means that I could learn to keep my keys somewhere else. The world is not like a box where everything belongs to its place. That's where uncertainty and chance and the freedom from fear, I think, comes in.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I think that's some good connections there. And of course, with that, there's, I think, also a certain sense, because of the way we're conditioned, we will feel vulnerable moving along that learning
Exactly.
arising of ascent that you're really talking about in levels. We will feel a vulnerability, not necessarily that I think that's even, I wouldn't want to say it's necessarily natural, but it's certainly conditioned into us to not be quite so
Mhm.
risking, or, and of course certain professions are more risky, but just in general, I think, and you're saying even in the East, generalizing, I say this in the West, generalizing, we started the conversation off with a certain sense, we're, to use the more clinical word, we're a bit neurotic about trying to control our environment, our body, our mental processes, and so on. And I think what you are bringing forth is an interesting prescription that you say at the end of your document. So I'm going to read it and have you explain it. So you say, the message is, based on all that work you've done, and by the way, you really sound like an engineer still, even though you're a philosopher. You have a very engineer type mind, I think, in the way you think and put things together, and you want to know how things can be deconstructed to be reconstructed. How does that mechanism work? So just you're an interesting philosopher that way. Not a criticism, of course. So you say, when you feel anxious, speaking to anyone, when you feel anxious and you're caught or stuck in that anxiousness, I think is really what you're saying. Because being anxious itself is neither here nor there. It's actually part of learning, right? Because we have to let
Yes.
certain things go to learn new things, and we can feel a little anxious about letting things go, not in our comfort zone. But what you then insert that I want to know where it comes from is practice self-love. So all of a sudden, after you've given all this wonderful engineering, philosophical, encompassing theory, then you use this notion of self-love, and I go, well, where is that coming from?
Self-love is where I say that we have to tolerate our mistakes and, in a way, celebrate our mistakes, I think, because you don't have new revelations unless you make mistakes. So tolerating your flaws is where I think that is the connection I make with self-love, because you can't love is not just happy and good experiences. Love is also tolerance, high levels of tolerance towards yourself or the other person. So self-love is, yes, so when you tolerate your flaws, when you accept your flaws and you treat them equally to your achievements, accomplishments, I think that is where anxiety could decrease, because anxiety is basically this feeling that I have predicted, I have this perfect sense of the world around me, but I am fearful that it might just collapse. The world, the perfect world that I have built in my mind could just collapse, and I could be a nothing person, because I am the predictions that I make. I am the person. I am a person because I can control some things. But if I can't control something, then I'm not a person anymore. But this idea should never exist in your mind, because when you practice self-love, you should be like, even if I make mistakes, even if I'm not in control of some things, I think the lack of control is where I should head towards. That is where I have to learn more about the things around me. Maybe my flaws are doorways to understand the things perfectly, more perfectly.
And just to add that I know you've lived some of what you're saying. Like, this is your experience as well.
Exactly.
You're not just theorizing. But I just had a thought that's kind of a little creative moment of, well, maybe this theory, when you say, practice self-love, I'm just going to push you a little bit on this, Pooja. I'm going to push you back a little bit, because there's a lot of discourse about self-love and its cure, and I'm not saying it isn't accurate, but I actually think your theory is actually a little bit different than that. I actually think what I've understood today in my little bit that I know, you're actually speaking about world love or reality love. When you go back to that physical level of the self, let's go right back to level one in your sense of your schema. It's in the understanding that we can now make through, again, reading, study, through your book and others. When we study that real basic physical dynamic, the real physical dynamic, which is the foundation for those levels that emerge from it, to the higher levels of consciousness. There is a love, I'm just going to put scare marks, there's a love of knowing, like for me to know the love that the physical world is working out its own intelligence. It's working out these problems. It loves itself. The world, reality,
Yes.
loves itself. And so that's a kind of love way before self-love in the way we normally think in a psychological term as human beings. And I think your theory actually points to taking the self-love concept of what I call modern humanistic type psychology and even spiritual psychology, and it says, whoa, let's go right down, because there's actually a foundational biophysical reality of love that is this intelligence of this system making mistakes, and not only making mistakes, but learning from mistakes.
Exactly.
And thus it's so loving, it's so giving creation. It's so giving that it produces all of the forms up to us. So I think it's
I
a
agree.
world love.
I agree with you.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I understood some of your theory. Do you have
I
anything
think it's a broader, the way you put it, I think it's a broader way of looking at the world around us.
Yeah. I think it
Yes,
would
because
actually help in some of the treatment interventions. I know you have some different interventions in the anxiety disorder problem, which are fear-based, kinds of stucknesses. I actually think that consciousness, multiple consciousnesses, multiple perspectives on understanding error and understanding the beauty of error in learning and creation, which we are basically a package of both successes and errors of evolution itself.
yes, and the severity you see, if you don't experience sadness, it
Mhm.
means that you can't ascend, you can't jump up to the level of locomotion. So sadness, the negative experiences are so crucial for you to learn, to experience new experiences, that they are, you can't, it's unfair that our society, we as humans, have developed to side with positive experiences so much that we have ignored the importance of negative experiences.
Yeah. So I think another word in the mystical traditions, especially of many of the religious and wisdom traditions, the mystical word for what you also have in your theory, which is, you say it brings us closer to love, believing in God and uncertainty. I think what a lot of the mystical traditions might use is believing in God and the mystery of what we don't
Exactly.
know about God. And
Exactly.
always keep that dialectic.
God
So
or world in general, or the world in general.
the world in general. And so I'm just going to conclude with a statement I wrote here. Let's see if I can find it. But I said, I think, Pooja, you have a philosophical argument which is based on a dialectical emotionalism. Does that fit for
Mhm.
you? Doesn't matter whether it does or not.
Perfect.
Does it?
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, it's a
Yes.
dialectical emotionalism, right? Of that
Mhm.
always moving up, ascending, descending, but ultimately always ascending is the evolutionary path, accepting the negative and the positive, that each of those
Exactly.
work off of each other, pain and
Mhm.
happiness and so on, pleasure. And
Glorification of negative experiences is where I think
yeah,
is something very crucial for me. It's very important for me.
okay.
Hmm.
Okay. So in the last minute or two, do you have any question or something that you wanted to bring out of me? Or not, that's fine. But even just to share your experience today, what was it like talking to me today?
Uh, I wanted to ask you about the idea of fearlessness. Of course, I have read most of your work, and I keep following your channel. So, could you just explain to me how you look at fearlessness?
Hmm. Well,
What do you think generally someone should do to be less fearful?
I think you already have offered many things that I would agree with in that path, right? I even call it a path of fearlessness. And I even sort of put love at one end of that path as a kind of ideal state, which I think you would probably put as a God consciousness, as a maximization of experiencing, and all the way down to, not fear in just an ordinary natural way, but the worst kind of toxic fear that's been culturally conditioned
Mm-hmm.
through hurt, through injury, through wounding, through oppression. And so I kind of put that path of fear and love together. And the reason I did that, to understand fearlessness, when I went in and started studying the literature, so I am not an engineer like you, in understanding all the mechanisms of the biophysiology, even though I have a biological training, I went in and studied all the texts that people had written across all the disciplines through history, cultures across, it didn't matter. And I
Mm-hmm.
just studied thousands and thousands of how do people write about fear, because I wanted to know how they make meaning of. And after a while, you get patterns. You start to
Mm-hmm.
see the patterns, and then you start to see where sort of everybody's sort of agreeing with certain things, and then you get a whole bunch of information that's quite contradictory. So you kind of come to a place where you can't really believe any one thing is the right way to understand about what fear is. So I
Mm-hmm.
started there. And then I found, Pooja, in a lot of the wisdom traditions around the world, east, west, north, south, through time, was they played with the concepts of love and fear. I saw them bringing those two together all the time. And I went, wow, you can't ignore that. There's probably something very fundamental. But this would be more at the metaphysical level of understanding, not so much the biophysical as the work you've done. But I think there's a correlation between the biophysical understandings of these really basic notions. I think you've been describing, in a sense, love and fear in a dialectical process. And you know what they call them in a lot of the literatures? They call them emotions, archetypal emotions, capital E, right? Because they're sort of basic principles, right? They're so basic to an emotional understanding, but way beyond what we'd normally call as human psychological emotion. They were metaphysical because they involved culture. They involved whole societies and ways of looking at the world and being. So the path of fearlessness to me was just at least giving a map to people. So this is my short version of a definition. It's path of fearlessness is the way. It's the way or the map between this fear-based stuckness, toxicity, destruction, that then can make choices and move along a path toward what is a natural ontological telos, right? A drive toward. And I think that's the drive toward growth and transcendence and optimization of experiencing. That is, yes, it's limits, because the path of fearlessness, you go forward, you kind of go back, you go into messes, you get injured, and you have to heal even memories from your past, which are these habitual patterns. And that becomes part of the therapeutic path, if you will, or a liberation path. This is not my own. I am just kind of mapping what I saw in all these traditions. So I studied text. You studied more phenomena. And that makes it very interesting to
And if I can, yes, and if I can add something to this,
yeah.
I think your idea could be thought in this way, that if I am in fear, I am the fear part of this spectrum that you talk about. And my end point, the point where I'm released from fear, is love. Then we could see it as a relationship between a lover and you, because a lover keeps you safe. The lover is basically some entity that is making you feel safe, and all your predictions mostly come true about your lover. So basically, if you want to be fearless, having a lover around you is good for you, because a lover makes you feel safe. So I think the feeling of being safe could be correlated with being free from fear.
Thank you. Yeah. And there's also, another angle really important to mention is the mother and the foundational experience.
Yes,
the phenomenological experience of the child in the womb for 9 months. This is like a whole world that we often have just dismissed, not important. Everything's important from here on after. And I think that's a huge mistake. So luckily there are, feminist and maternal researchers looking at that psychology. But that's a whole other topic. Thank you for this today, Pooja. And
thank you so much.
Good night.
I had a great time talking with you.
I enjoyed it too. Bye-bye.
And you have a good night. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.